like to call the order of the Pleasant Grove City Council in our work session this afternoon on this Tuesday, October the 4th, 2022. And we have all our council members present this evening. I'm Mayor Guy Fugel and I'll be conducting. And we'll now turn our time over to our city administrator for our first item.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We've invited the Beautification Committee, I don't know what the official term is for them, to come and give us about a 5-minute report on what they've been up to. So 5 or less, I mean, you don't. Three. Three's wonderful. So I don't know who the spokesman's going to be, but come on up.
She's the spokesperson.
We're happy to be here. I'm Lorraine Montgomery. Was chairman, but in January we elected a new chairman and she's had to resign because of work issues and stuff. So I guess I'm taking over for till January again. Got Kathy Watkins with me, Brett Robertson, and Glenn. I should remember that one. Anyway, we're happy to be here and to report what we've been doing. We started out with Arbor Day, helping plant trees at Manila/Discovery Park and help the parks people plant some trees out there. Hope they're doing well. I haven't been out to check on them. I'm going to turn some time over to Brett. Brett and Nathan Gerber have run the Zoom classes, gardening classes online that have been such a success. So I'm going to let Brett take over and tell about those.
And Lorraine, really quick, who is on the committee that isn't here tonight? Nathan Gerber?
Nathan is not on the, well,
He's kind of a tentatively.
he had to,
He's
yeah,
ambassador.
he's got a new job at work and it's,
But he's still gonna help.
he's still going to
Okay.
help with the JD. I should have brought my list up.
Of all the people?
Yeah, that's not here.
Like, how many do you have on your
We
committee?
have 11.
Oh, wow, okay.
We have a good
Awesome.
size. I
Okay,
mean,
thank
we're
you.
one for every neighborhood.
Oh, awesome, okay.
That's right.
Okay, well, we just put on the classes this year, so we first started talking just about getting your gardens ready, and then talked about WaterWise, with just the water situation. We wanted to focus a lot on techniques and strategies within gardening or lawn care that you could do to still get a good, beautiful lawn without having to put a lot of water on. So we did a lawn care maintenance class. We talked about getting your gardens ready. We've talked about harvesting, when you harvest your crops and some things you can do. Our next one is in October, in a week and a half, that we're going to talk about getting your gardens ready for next year, putting things down. But it has been in good attendance. We've usually had about 20 to 30 people on there. The lawn care one, we had probably about 40 or 50. This last one with harvesting was a smaller number, just because it's really it's unique. It's more about canning and kind of utilizing your crop and how to extend it, which doesn't always interest a lot of people. But the next one we hope to kind of talk about. So our goal is to kind of reach out after this, is to see what are some topics that people are interested in. I know where our water situation is and where it could be next year. I'm feeling it as well with our farm and stuff. So we're just kind of going to look at that approach of looking at ways we can do WaterWise. Nathan's been working on the webpage, creating some WaterWise resources so people and patrons can go to. And then one thing that we kind of talked about that I know she'll probably mention, but we been looking at the current policies and codes in regards to that's in Pleasant Grove City in regards to landscaping and lawn care, of what the codes are. And we're looking to meet with, I think the city, I can't remember who exactly, the city engineer who we need to meet with to kind of maybe give some suggestions of what we could do to change those to where that if new people move in, you know, because the old laws state that they have to have grass and have all those things. And so we're looking at ways to where we can maybe focus on water initiatives and water conservation, but still, you know, keep Pleasant Grove beautiful and full of trees and life and everything here.
Thanks, Brent. Kathy Watkins has been over our Strawberry Day Garden Tour for 4 years, 5 years, and she's done a,
Since it started, right?
yeah.
I don't know how long it's been.
Anyway, she's done an awesome job, and she's going to talk a little bit about the garden tour and how it's evolved and what's ahead of us with it.
Well, there's not a whole lot to say. So for the Strawberry Days, I usually try to get 10 homes, and Sid always helps me do that and put it on the website, which is great. And people have been very willing, and even during COVID, we did a drive-by one, and Linda Walker, they told me that they had counted the one day, the Sunday before, and they had 70 people had stopped and was looking. They said even the drive-by one during COVID helped a lot. But there's a lot of people that tell me they just look forward to that every year, and it's fun, we love it, and people are very willing to share their yards. So if you know any good yards, let me know.
Thank you, Kathy.
And Kathy already has some in her book for next year.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, especially the people that have yards of the month, we kind of tap into those people. And in June, we kicked off the yards of the month with our 11 neighborhoods, which gives us 44 homes that receive awards for the summer, from June till September. And it's so fun because you go knock on people's doors and they go, oh, my yard's not worth having this. There's so-and-so down the street, or this or that, or I've got this weed, but anyway, it's really one of the highlights of my serving on the committee is to do the yard of the month. In August, we had a dinner with the committee members and their families, and that was really fun to get to meet the spouses and their kids, and we just sit and visited, and so we had that. Next month, in November, we're going to do recognition dinner for the Parks Department and honor them for keeping Pleasant Grove beautiful and keeping our parks beautiful. I know it's a struggle for Dion and his crew to keep the lawns green and mowed, but we really appreciate what they do and how they work to keep that. So we do a little dinner for them and give them a little recognition.
His
Yeah.
face is turning red back there, by the way. It's
Yeah,
okay.
it's
It's a good thing.
He's been out in the sun. Anyway, but we do appreciate what the Parks Department does to help our city. The last few months, we've had a change. As long as I've been on, I haven't seen the change that we've seen with our group, but Nathan's not going to be a chairperson for a neighborhood, but we've had 2 other people has had to step down because of family reasons and work and stuff. So we have replaced one. We have another application, so we need 1 more person to make our commission complete again. So we're wanting that done by January so we can start off.
Is there a neighborhood or something? Is there a particular neighborhood?
You know, the one neighborhood is Grove Creek that we're needing.
We did get the one.
Ron Kidd is the new person. We need to get him in to meet with someone,
The mayor.
the mayor, on
You know
that. And he's going to take one of the neighborhoods. We've got some people that's not in their right neighborhoods, which they don't mind, so we're going to try to shift them around a bit. So, and we also want to thank Carissa and Kyle Hoops. They do the article for the city newsletter every month, and they do awesome getting things in to put in that, and also to recognize our 11 homes for that month for Yard of the Month. And we give the Yard of the Month people lanterns this last year as a thank you. And it has Yard of the Month and the year on it. So I feel like we're moving forward. We appreciate Councilman Bullock for coming to our meetings and supporting us, and anyway, we
He's had
have,
better attendance than Mr. Mr. Jensen.
yeah,
Hey, that was an ouch.
Or no.
Wow.
Thank you, Brad.
Anyway.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Anyway, that's what we've been doing this last year, and hopefully we could, yeah, we do keep busy, even though it probably doesn't look like much, but even just to get your yards of the month. We've got one neighborhood, Northfield is big,
Yeah.
and we would really like to put 2 people out in that area if we could.
Remind me, do you do anything like with Christmas lights, like recognizing
Oh,
homes?
yes.
With
I didn't-
Christmas
I
lights?
didn't write that down. Yes, we will be doing Christmas lights in December. And we-
What about Halloween
I knew.
decorations? Do you recognize homes that decorate for Halloween?
Have a-
That go above and
should.
beyond, if you will?
I don't think you ought to.
I
Don't
do.
waste your time on Halloween.
Halloween
Thanks,
has
Brent.
not been real big, but
But
it's
we
coming.
could make it
Exactly
big.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So anyway, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Brett,
Appreciate you coming in.
could you show Scott your shirts, just so he can see that wonderful shirt? Right here, Scott.
University of Utah, yes.
I look at that every day from certain employees.
Yeah, there was one running around today in the office. I remember seeing that, so. Okay, we'll now move on to our next item, our discussion with St. John's Properties and their development.
Turn it over to,
This is super hard training for marathons.
Good to be back with each of you. This set up the way I used to. Get it up high enough. Glad to be back before you to have this second work session. We really appreciate you allowing us to do this and kind of work through some of these things on this this project. We're excited to keep things moving and moving in the right direction and getting your help and participation in that does help us keep moving. I thought it'd be helpful to just quickly talk about the phasing, because phasing today is going to be a lot of discussions on mainly Phase 4 and Phase 6. But you can just kind of remind you how we at St. John Properties look at this property through our phasing. And so right now we're talking, Phase 6 is the main vision of what is needing to, what we're working on developing, but kind of pulls in a little bit of Phase 4 and some of the concepts that we've looked at. Again, Valley Grove, with the 130 acres there and all of that that we've been working through. From our last work session, a few of the things that we did here that were important and things that will be addressed is the overall concept of the site plan. We did hear about the overall plaza promenade, some of those concepts and ideas about different ways to lay out this development. It can be done a million different ways. This was a first draft concept of that. Have had lots of ideas since, but there's a piece of that is critical, and that's this luxury residential discussion that we would love to have today to just kind of get some direction, because for us, you take out a building, then you've got to be able to figure out how you're going to lay that out. So we could go and leave it the way it was and try to figure out the plaza and the surround and things of that nature, but that might all change depending on the direction you give on the residential aspect of that. So that's one of our goals today, is kind of work through that by giving some information. So one of the things we heard was, okay, there is a different concept vision of that. We kind of had the vision of placemaking, of looking towards Temp, of the G Mountain with more of a linear plaza. All of that is something that we plan to get back to once we have some direction and guidance on the direction on the residential piece, if that's something that's entertained. So one of the things I think as we kind of look through this, Daniel's going to take this first step here to kind of talk and lay out what we heard from the council was, okay, we understand that there needs, from our perspective, needs to be a residential aspect to this. We would like to have one. And what we heard was, well, tell us what that means. The council has come and said, well, we would love to have a nice gathering place. We'd love to have a vision here where people can congregate, the community to come and enjoy restaurants, outdoor space, and enjoy that atmosphere that we've experienced in other developments. We would love to see that here. And St. John Properties has said, okay, how do we work that in? How do we come up with a concept that works? And that's important because we want a team. We aren't interested in just moving forward under what we've done before and just move forward on building the development with commercial and retail and meeting the zone. We're trying to work in the other aspects that are the vision of the council. And I think that that's important. That's what we did. We said, okay, well, what is the value that that's adding to a standard market rate type development over phase 6 versus trying to get that higher density, trying to get that increased plaza area. And that's what we're trying to answer today. So I'm going to turn the time over to Daniel to talk through that.
Thanks, Marty. Mayor, council, it's good to be back. Thank you. Sincerely, thank you for these work sessions. These are helpful. We get to tackle hard things. We get to talk about hard things. We get some direction and we make progress. So thank you. Just so that I don't overstay my welcome, at what point do Marty and I need to make sure we are no longer standing right here so that I use your time effectively?
Well, we're supposed to be through at 5:30.
5:30. We'll be done before then. And if you need to evict us, I like that word. I use that word in my business. Early, you let us know.
5:30.
Okay. Thank you for that, and we'll make a good use of that time. As Marty mentioned, lots of good feedback last week on design, site plan, layout. I don't want to ignore that. That stuff is critical. I'm going to jump to kind of the second element of what we heard in the last work session, which is just bluntly said, residential and unit count, right? And our original concept had a unit count, and through that work session last 2-3 weeks ago, we discovered it probably was in our best interest to see if we could work up some different options, right? Instead of, I pick a number, you pick a number, I pick a number, you pick a number, we thought, let's see if we at St. John Properties can coherently put together some different options that might work, some with some pros, some with some cons, and it just depends on preferences. I've had an opportunity to talk through some of this with Scott, so he had some idea of what we're looking at and could give me a little bit of direction. That was very helpful, so thank you for that. But I want to go through that. Before getting into the options, I think it's really important that we all remember there's an incredible option out there, and that is a market rate project with no need for any incentives or anything like that. You guys keep 100% of your tax revenue, and we just go to the market and we build something that we're confident the market would pay for. That's what we do. That was our intent when we purchased the property, right? We did not have any intent to be in here asking for a rezone or asking for incentive. We were looking to do a market rate project. And that's still an option. You'll see that as we work through these options. So just don't forget that is an option. We feel we're here because both groups, the city and St. John Properties, want to explore an opportunity. And I don't know if we really know exactly how that's going to end up. That's why we're here. So we're exploring what could happen, and I'll use the term non-market rate, something that is a little bit different than maybe what a market would traditionally pay for or outside of the returns of what a developer would look for from their investment, right? And there are some options there, but it takes cooperation from us. It takes cooperation from the city to see if that opportunity is right. And it might be, it might not be. We're working through that. So just keep that in mind as we work through these options. So one thing that Marty and I did is we went back and we looked and we said, okay, what are the elements of what we're proposing that's really challenging for us to get a market to pay for, right? And there's several things, but without overcomplicating it, we boiled it down to two things. One is just density, right? When you surface park a suburban retail or business park, like 95% of them are, that in itself has limits with density, right? So we were trying to figure out here, how do we get more of everything, right? How do we get more retail? How do we get more office? How do we get another hotel? And in doing that, the parking really drives density. If you use the land to park flat, it just removes a lot of ability to go vertical, right? So I'll get into some numbers here, but the density, and in particular the retail density, all of the residential parking is contained within the building. There's none of the residential is surface parked or across the site. It's all on that lot. So really the parking that you'll see on the surface and in structures is for the retail and the office pieces. Okay, so that was one piece of kind of the non-market rate. We're trying to get density. The second piece is this awesome idea. I love the idea of community and plaza and something unique and gathering and something that quite honestly might draw different types of tenants than a market rate project would, right? So there's nothing wrong with that plaza. We love it. We love the idea of it. We think there's a value there. There's just also cost, right? So what we're going to look at with these options really is looking at the economics of those costs, density and the parking and this plaza, and then trying to figure out how those costs are accounted for, whether it's by the market or whether it's by St. John Properties or whether it's in cooperation with the city. So I'm going to hit a down button here. There's a lot going on here. Don't get too overwhelmed. We'll start in the top left corner. So this is just the summary of some of those costs. We ran these past Scott. He has not verified them. I'm not saying he verifies them, but we did review them with him. We need about 1,400 parking stalls within structured parking to support the 200,000 square feet of retail. And it's a little bit offset with the office, but 1,400 stalls, it costs about $22,000 per stall. So to get that density, it's expensive. Yep. $2,000 per stall. That number came from Dunn and Associates, a structural engineer. Costs there of about $30 million. The plaza, call it about $19 million. A lot of that's the land. It's hard to give up 2 acres to something that isn't directly generating direct revenue. There's value to it, and then there are improvements on that plaza. And we want to do it right. We want it to be nice. We want to spend money there. So for round numbers, there's about $50 million of non-market rate costs that we at St. John Properties are trying to figure out to deliver this project, right? And my original intent, our original intent was, let's see if we can do this without incentive. We want the city to keep their revenue, right? We want you to keep your property tax, your retail tax. You guys have other issues and concerns in the city where that money could be used. Our first objective was to look to the market. So in that, like it or not, residential right now really, really helps with that, right? There's just a value on that product type that is higher, that could help us deliver some of those other things that the market wouldn't pay for. So that's the top left corner. Now I'm going to go into these options. And what we'll do is I'll walk you through them so you can kind of understand, but there's a couple things really to just catch on to in here. There's a column there, the second column to the left, luxury residential units. Those options progressively get fewer and fewer units, right? So there is options to go from the 1320 that we proposed and get that down lower. And then we tried to show a little bit of what are the things that are needed to offset that $49 million that would need to happen if we're not capturing those costs with units. So we'll walk through these, but then the other piece I want you to look at is the residential acres, right? So the first one we proposed was about 16 and a half, and then as we go down, you'll lose them in chunks. I want to explain a little bit why these numbers are what they are. This product is built in blocks, right? Usually between about 350 and 400 units, just depending on the site and the layout and some other things like that. So it's not like a sliding scale of you drop 1 unit or you drop, 10 at a time. They really come in blocks, right? Because they'll either be 3 buildings, 2 buildings, 1 building, or no buildings, right? And built in those chunks, these are those numbers and the unit count associated with the number of buildings and where they're situated. Okay. Any questions before we get into the options on to this point? I just don't want to jump over a question. Okay. The next column in these options, you'll see none of these options, other than the very last one, reduce or increase the amount of retail. They all contain about 28 acres of retail. Even though the luxury residential acreage is changing, the retail is staying the same and the replacement property is office. Current zoning requires at least 50% to be retail. And what we're exploring in all of these options other than option 8 is in excess of the minimum requirement, not just from acreage, but also a density. Okay. The next columns I'm going to leave for a second because I'm going to now tie back the options with the SJP costs and this incentive request, okay? So option 1 is what we brought a couple weeks ago, 1,320 units, 16 and a half acres. The response was too many units. Understandable, very, I don't think any of us were shocked. So the next option really is just reducing the density within those buildings on the same acreage, right? It's still 3 buildings and 16 and a half acres. It's just a lower density, and we can do that. What that does is it leaves about a $6.2 million gap towards the costs of the non-market items. And I'll give credit to Marty on this one. He said, Daniel, I think before you ask the city to contribute, St. John Properties should contribute. Sharpen the pencil, take a little bit of the hit, put some skin in the game, and absorb some of those costs, right? So option 2, everything stays the same as what we presented other than the unit count is lower, and St. John Properties is basically going to fill that gap, and there's no need for any additional incentive from the city. City keeps 100% of your revenue. You don't have to ask for anything from the school district or the county. And then there's some tax numbers there that I'll let you kind of just visually take your eyes through as we work through these numbers. Okay, so that's option 2, just lower density. Option 3, this is where you'll start to see some moving pieces, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between these so you can see where we're proposing some different things, and then I would really want to hear your preferences on location and what you're thinking. So option 3, oh, thank you. Option 3 would be we'd be getting rid of one building, we'd be going down to 2 buildings. And where would those 2 buildings be in option 3? The 2 residential buildings would stay in phase 6. So this would stay here, this building would go away. What would replace that would be some of this product that's over here, okay? So that's option 3. Gets the unit count down. It's just 2 buildings and leaves these 2 buildings right here. That would get you to about 840 units. And St. John Properties, because of the lower unit count, there's less within our pro forma and our budget to be able to continue to contribute. So this basically is a sliding scale based off of the number of units and what we could contribute. And then this is the remaining gap to get to cover those costs. So St. John we reduced the unit count. St. John Property pays a little. The city would contribute in some type of incentive or other manner in which that could be achieved. And then just keep glancing over here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but you can see as the unit, as this goes down, incentive goes up and taxes go down. Option 4, very similar. We're still looking at 2 buildings, but we're going to go in a different direction. One's going to stay up here, one's going to stay down here. And the residential building that would be removed would be replaced with a multi-story office building like this, right? They're equally about 6 acres. So that's option 4. So lower unit count, increased need from help from the city because of that lower unit count. And you'll see the acreage is also dropping because the acreage up on phase 4 is smaller than the available site on phase 6. And the rest, just kind of blowing through the rest of these, they just progressively get less. Option 5, 1 residential building, 1 multi-story office building, and 2 single-story office buildings. So you basically keep one of these and you do 1 office and you do office up there. So that unit count drops by another building. Now you're down to 6 acres. All your retail's staying the same. But this gap is not being funded by the product and the market. It's needing to be funded by us in the city. And then the last option, or the 6th option, is very similar. It's just placing the building up on phase 4 on the 4.5 acres. Option 7. Now this one's a little tricky to look at. Now let me explain. This is 0 units, but it's assuming everything else in the project that is desired, the plaza, the parking, the retail density stays the same. There's a gap there, a big one, that is unfunded. So, would need to come from an incentive or something from the city to make that happen. So, and then option 8, this was the one I actually started with. It's a market rate project. No need for any residential, 0 units, 0 incentive. You keep all of your revenue, no TIF, and we build what the market tells us when the market's ready. And what that would probably look like is us just continuing as users come. When we need another building, we'd find, it's additional land. We'd find a building. We have a couple users that might want to buy some pieces. But it would not include the retail density or the plaza.
When do you lose the plaza in your options?
Only on option. Everything else gets all the plaza, the community, and the density.
Okay, I'll wait till you're done there.
I think that's kind of the point. Any questions about the options? Is it clear? Kind of maybe not all of them, but kind of where things are going and trending.
So on that reduced tax, the 20 years, the last column, that's both property and sales? Or just property?
Correct, for just these two phases. And this is just the city's portion.
That's $11 million that we would not get.
Compared to the original proposal. There's still a lot of tax there, right? I mean, there's still $10 million of revenue. I mean, we can still generate quite a bit of revenue to the city. Oops, I'm getting into Marty's presentation. Yeah.
Okay.
So, any questions about any of that? Any direction or preference on location of those buildings? Meaning up here versus down here? Eric?
I have to just take it all in and think about it first. I can't give an honest answer right now.
Okay. Let me, if there are no questions or direction or feedback at this time on those options, let me let Marty finish up with, he's got some other graphics and a couple other things, and then maybe we can come back here in a couple minutes and see what direction we take from this meeting.
Just elaborate a little bit on your last option there on the market. And so you say it would be the same as what you've been doing now with, is that?
It could be different, you know, if, I hate to speak in hypotheticals or something that might not happen, but, you know, Fat Cats is interested, right? Instead of me incorporating them into a comprehensive project, it could be that we could sell them a couple acres and they would be in here with their site plan and working through their stuff. Or we've had a couple other groups that would like maybe to do an office campus or headquarters or something like that, and whether we build it and lease it or sell a couple acres to them. If, you know, if different restaurants come, kind of like we've been doing, you create a pad for them somewhere, and we want as much land in Pleasant Grove as possible. That's why we bought it, and our intent was just to keep in front of the market with product. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Just kind of the same of what you've got going on down there now, but
Yeah.
a few things could have been, there may be some bigger projects or things may change. But no
What-
plaza, no big, not a lot of bells and whistles, just the same old,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Yeah.
You've
It's
been doing that.
it's what has been built up and down the freeway by most suburban office and retail developers. That just trends more to what the market wants, and yeah,
Okay.
it's a great question. Any other questions? Marty?
Great. We wanted to save some time to kind of workshop a little bit, but so just really quickly, there's two slides that I think kind of describe this and break it down into more of a pie chart to help understand each one of the options. And so as you look at option 1 through option 4, this kind of just gives you the breakdown of 0. Again, kind of the red is the incentive ask. So you can see with option 1, straightforward, no ask. Option 2, no ask. Option 3, there would be an ask of about 13 million versus the residential. And I think what's important about this is as we began talking about how do we get these improvements that will help and create that space, the increased density, there's a value to the residential that it adds and is actually paying for those amenities that you're asking to try to incorporate into the development project. There is a value to them, and that's what this is showing essentially, is that about $31.5 million under that concept for those 840 units is able to be used towards creating the parking, the structured parking and the increased, the plaza area. And so that's kind of what that shows. And then just the next one is just kind of where it goes to, there's just a lot of incentive and a lot of cost when you start looking above that market value that can be done there. So a couple other quick things. I also heard some discussion about traffic and impacts with that more density creates a traffic issue down in the area, because that's the discussion we've heard for 5 years. I dealt with it many, many times. So here's the reality of this high density in that area versus doing multi-story buildings. So instead of doing those residential, let's just do a typical multi-story office in both of those. And this is what Hell's Engineering came back with as they did that study. Those two residential buildings, 840 units on phase 6, would create about 3.6% more weekday, so this is weekday daily trips, than if you did mid-rise office buildings. So if we did 2 office buildings instead of residential buildings, 3.6% more traffic. However, the luxury residential units are expected to generate approximately 11% less morning peak hour trips and 8% less evening peak hour trips than the mid-rise office buildings. So your peaks are what create the congestion and the problems. And if you add more to your peaks by adding more high-rise buildings, you're just creating more congestion versus these residentials. They leave at different times. They aren't all leaving during the peak. Then it's also important to realize that there's a lot of that traffic is actually leaving the site. They aren't coming where a lot of the traffic is coming to those sites. It says here, if the project added more office space, it would compound already having heavy morning inload and heavy evening outload traffic flows from the project area. So the residential units and that case that it's going to create more congestion, it actually reduces congestion because it's the alternative to that is actually creating some multi-story office space that would be in those locations. And so I thought that was important. It's not the end all of things, but it is important to understand that even if we don't do the residential there, we're going to be doing something that has a high traffic volume. Those roads and this next picture, again, the vision, and it's kind of hard to see, it's a little bit darker, but the great thing about all this is already working through the process. The environmental assessment for this preferred concept that UDOT gave me a month ago is now supposed to be done by the end of the year. So then it can be moved into a funding aspect. When the environmental assessment's done, the next step is when is the right time to fund it. So that's a good thing, is that whatever's done here, at least this part of it is done, and the vision of that, and we're working with UDOT to try to solve the overall congestion issue by selling. You can see there's a significant amount of property that needs to be acquired in order to create this frontage road system and create some of that reduced congestion. So that's what I wanted to make sure we were clear on that. I think there was a couple other things that I didn't really delve into the last time about this residential value. That, yes, is it a sales pitch? Whatever you may say about it, but is there value of having residents on site? And I think that there is. There's a lot of reasons. Do multi-story office buildings, they're great. It's what we do. We have lots of them. But is there a value to having a residential, high value luxury residential on this site? I think it adds to that overall area, the look and feel. It also brings in great people into the community. Again, these are higher end residential. You kind of compare that to the demands of what's currently here. We don't have this product in Pleasant Grove or even in Utah County at this time to be able to kind of say, well, that's what it's going to do. But I think it does create a little bit of synergy of drawing people to that area. The lights are going to be on. It's going to be active more so than just through 5:30 at night and everybody's heading out of there from their offices. It's going to create that draw a little bit, increase sales tax and increase property taxes. So I think that there is some synergy, that it's maybe a little bit different than what you're dealing with in some of the other areas. Not completely. There's still the aspect that it is Still, you know, there are more people, but at the same time that this is the right location, in my opinion, to do this. And it also builds the other aspects of the project, the retail aspects where people are going to be shopping there, and it brings that higher value product to that. So just wanted to kind of walk through those pros and cons. I know that the residential, a big issue with the city is the fire and police and that additional demand. But I think if we're looking at that, we aren't just looking at the fire and police for residential versus nothing. The reality is we're looking at this residential versus a high-rise building or something that's going to be there, that's going to have a lot of demand. It's going to generate a lot of traffic. You're going to have traffic issues. Well, whether or not somebody gets in an accident or has a problem of that issue, you know, those are going to happen regardless of what we build down there. But this luxury residential product, I think, brings an added value to that above some of those issues. So that's what we wanted to leave some time to kind of work through. Daniel, was there anything else on that you wanted to?
I want to hear from you. We'd love to get direction so that we can keep moving a conversation forward.
Question, does the luxury apartments have, does the luxury apartments have security?
They can.
Okay.
So if I could boil this down, this is kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, sure.
Could you go back to the money page?
Options or?
Residential, pay you an incentive to do so, or get what we've already have. Is that fair?
I'm not sure I understand. What's the question?
There's no question. I'm just trying to sum it up, right? I'm trying to process.
Okay.
So we're going to build residential. There's an incentive that we need to pay if we don't choose mega residential. And if we don't do that, then we're just going to kind of get what we already have down the Grove.
Minus the plaza.
So I think it's a way to.
I know that may
Okay,
not
yeah.
sound good.
No.
That's not a sales, I'm just.
I know.
Is that what you're saying?
Someone's got to pay for it.
Let me restate kind of what I heard. Yes, there is something different that's being asked to try to incorporate into this project that's not typical market driven. You don't see that everywhere along I-15 in every development that goes on. There is a cost aspect to build what the city's vision is that's up and above a market value project. So,
But
yes.
that vision, but that
How do
doesn't-
we pay for
but-
that?
But that vision hasn't changed for 5 years. I mean, we've been very clear as a council collectively to say we don't want residential, we don't want major office buildings in this area. We're okay in that other area, that Daniel, that you currently own. But we want this downtown Grove, or this Grove area, to be special. And what I'm seeing, I'm a little disappointed in.
So, Todd, thank you again. Your opinions are always honest, which makes it easy. A little bit of a confession here. I want this project too. I think it's a pretty cool project. I think it could be something pretty good for the city. It could be pretty good for us at St. John Properties. I'm here exploring this because I think it could be a good thing for us. Residential's not, it's not allowed. We understand that. We could do a project without it, if that's what we're handed. There's an ordinance there. There's great guidelines about what we can and can't do, and that's why we bought it. I didn't buy it to build your vision, unfortunately. And that's the brutal truth. I didn't buy it to build your vision. We're here to see if we can cooperate to find out how to do it. I'm curious what Councilman Bullock thinks. He was not here for the first work session, and I have not had an opportunity to hear from you.
I met with Marty yesterday. So I'm aware.
Yeah, we went over the first.
Yeah.
the First.
We went over that, and I understand, and I have to admit I didn't have a clear understanding about if we want the bells and whistles of what we observed elsewhere, somebody has to pay for it. Now, it's either the city or you. You're in the business to make money, to make a profit. We're sort of in the business to keep as much money as we would, so we don't have to go to the taxpayers. I understand that if we want the bells and whistles, we have to take a different look. I'm not sure where the number is, quite frankly, but I think that somebody's going to have to pay for that. Now, my idea when I first took my position was, well, that really ought to be St. John's. But I understand, as we spoke yesterday, and I thought about that, and it's reaffirmed by these numbers that that's not going to happen. Now, you may want to put some more skin in the game to maybe convince me and or other people on the council.
Thank you for that. The lots of different options. I like letting the market pay for it, meaning it is a higher unit count, and I get that. There's lots of reasons you have to not like that, and there's lots of reasons for me to like that. But one of the benefits of letting the market pay for it, which is the units, is I don't have to go any more than about 6.2 million into it, and you guys don't have to put a dime into it. And if you look at, and I think Diana asked this question last week, if you look at the consequence of that sliding scale, let's just say you went from option 2, which is 3 buildings, to option 3 or 4, you're looking at 4 acres, 4.5 acres, but you're keeping all of your revenue. And you're generating more of it. It's a little bit more of what you don't want, which is units, but with one tick up, you get to keep everything.
I thought as I left the meeting with Marty, is the sell, and I think we don't want any high-rise or multi-housing because of the types of multi-housing that we've seen. Now, with that in mind, if we can figure out a way where you're not going to be begging us for much money, then those who are opposed, citizens, to multi-housing easily can be told, we're not like what happened in American Fork. We're not giving up tax money. The school district's not giving up tax money. The county's not giving up tax money. And we're only into it this much. That, for me, is a much more sellable as a councilman than to say, well, we want this and this, and we have to come up with some money to get it.
I agree. Our time is up. I don't know if Scott has any direction on how we can move to next steps, or?
Well, I've got this one. We can still work a few minutes here. I mean, it seems like what we need to do too is, and I see these incentive requests are really getting up there, but I think we need to take a hard look and talk to our financial people what we can, for what you're proposing to do down there, what we're willing to do to incentivize. I think that's one thing, so we can greatly reduce the residential or get rid of it, and then bring it before the council and say, well, hey, we're only at, we cap out at $18 million for incentives, then that's, gives you another starting point. I don't know, is that, Scott, what do you think our option is to?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I think the council needs opportunity to digest what you heard today. I don't think we're in decision-making mode.
Yeah.
No.
But I do think we bring them back relatively soon, so the council has an opportunity to think through now what's being proposed by St. John Properties. So their initial estimates on revenues has been vetted by Randy Sand. Now, when they were looking at potential property taxes, sales tax revenues, there were some assumptions had to be made. Not all sales tax generators are equal. Costco would generate $1 million a year for us, which is what this project would generate for us. And so sometimes it matters the types of retail that can end up in this project. So this is something I can take back to Randy and say, okay, Randy, let's take a look at this. There's some other factors when it comes to the incentive. There's a lot of moving pieces that have to be accounted for. One of which is the RDA there is on about a 9-year window, 8-year window before that RDA expires. In order to generate 13 million, 18 million, 31 million, that's going to be participation from the school district and the county. Okay, so that's a discussion we would have to have with them to see what their participation level would be if they are interested in participating. Likely, we would need to extend the RDA to 20 years instead. I don't think you can generate that in the 9-year. I don't think there's enough money being assessed here in order to generate the revenue to do that. Now, I could be wrong, but that's where Randy Stamp could look at that and say, this is kind of what path we would need to follow. So if the council's coming back saying, we want to take a look at the incentive side of this as opposed to the housing side, or a mixture of both, then we need to get Randy involved to start putting that package together to see what that looks like. Because I have no idea what the school district's going to come in on this. State law has changed. We're not allowed to incentivize retail anymore. We can incentivize office. We can incentivize housing. I don't know if the school district would incentivize housing. Generally speaking, they don't incentivize housing. So, but there's discussions that have to happen in order to take a look at that. Keeping in mind that our tax revenues will also decrease if we go the incentive route, because now we are taking some of the taxes generating and giving it back to the developer. That's why the developer is saying the market rate to use the residential component to pay for the amenities would be I think this is what Brent was stating, would be potentially a better way to go as far as just tax generation. So we have the financial component to this, we have the political component, which is, are we going to allow density in this project? That's a political question that the council's going to have to eventually answer and say that this is where we're at and what we can do. By way of context, and this was something that never really got to the city council when we were having discussion with CenterCal. So CenterCal met with, so me, Tina, and the mayor, Marty at the time, as Public Works, as they presented a couple concept plans to us. Their concept plans were different than what they did at Station Park and what they did at Mountain View Village. They were a little bit more of an open concept. Okay, if you remember Station Park, that was kind of a closed concept where they have the water feature and that. So the concept that they were showing to us, so they would show us and then we take it back. Like I don't have a copy of this. But CenterCal's intention was also to ask for units. Now, we never brought that, by the time, we had one meeting with the school district, Center Cal was not in the room, it was just the city floating the idea of a $20 million incentive. And then by that point, I think it was about a week later, the Center Cal project fell apart. And so that's all the further it got. We never got back in front of the council to have this very discussion we're having tonight. And so the council never saw where Center Cal was heading as far as what they were asking for in order to make their project work. So that's just for context purposes. I don't think they were gonna get $20 million incentive. I don't think the school district was there. We never had that discussion as a city, but we never got in front of the county to have that discussion. So that's, I think what, the path moving forward is let's let the city look at this. Let's have Randy vet the numbers, take a look at that and say, okay, this sounds about right. And then ultimately, we bring it back, but we'll need to have a discussion. The council's eventually gonna have to say yes to housing, or no to housing, or yes to housing and some incentive. We can always negotiate less incentive. I don't know how St. John Properties will feel about that. This is a negotiation. There is some parts and things that we can do. But for the purpose of tonight, I don't know if we need to
Yeah,
start throwing out options here to say.
Or-
Daniel's
I don't
gonna
think
give us part of his salary to help with this.
That's the 18 million part, right?
A little,
So are there any questions for me?
any questions for Scott?
no.
I mean, we're making progress on decision-making, but this is obviously a huge project for the
This is
city.
very
It's a
helpful.
huge project
Thank
for
you.
St. John
Yes.
Properties. And once a decision's made, that's where we're headed. That's what's gonna happen.
That's,
So
that,
let's make sure both parties can get to a place
yeah,
where we're.
and let's get moving on this.
Okay, that's the way we'll proceed then. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
thank Johns for coming and thanks for explaining this out and showing the different options because that's definitely something we haven't really seen.
Can we get
Or-
copies of this, by the way?
Okay, appreciate that. Well, we've used all our time for our work session, so if I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A second, all